And you can see that the theme of the day, I'll be talking several times, is essentially extraordinary results, as Carl said, extraordinary results in what I'm calling ordinary places. And I don't mean that in any way that would be degrading to them. What I mean is that they don't have any unusual advantages. They're not a place like Blacksburg or Charlottesville. They don't have a major university. They don't have some sort of recreational facilities like an Aspen or Myrtle Beach or something. They just have human resources. And the theme that I want to talk about this morning is essentially education and economic development, some lessons from some extraordinary communities. And I hope that you'll be a full participant in this. Now, it's my interpretation, at least, that the reason you're here is that you are concerned citizens. All of you have left very important things on your desks and have made a considerable sacrifice just to be here. And I respect that. I respect you for that willingness to do that. And it's extremely important that this time be useful for you. And so one of the things that when I speak here, and I really don't regard myself as a speaker, and I gag at the idea that I might be a consultant. I just gag at that, quite frankly. Many of the consultants I've met are overpaid and tell you what they read in a book. And so I'm a little bit uneasy about that. I always see myself as a partner. And so I have been here before. Great respect for what you're doing. And I'm eager to learn from you. So I see this as an opportunity for us to have a very serious conversation about ways in which we can take a good community and take it to another level. So that's our focus for the day. So I thank you, and I thank Carl and Clark for taking me around today and showing me some of the things and just inviting me. This is quite an honor. Here, before I leave this, I've got my thanks to the Danville Foundation. And much of my work has been sponsored by the Annie E. Casey Foundation and the Kettering Foundation. Don't know if you know them. The Annie E. Casey Foundation is the heir to the UPS fortune. Kettering is the heir to the Charles Kettering Foundation money. But they work on citizenship and try to promote citizenship. We've got projects in more than 70 different countries. And without them, I couldn't be here today. And then, again, special thanks to you as a participant. Before I leave this topic, let me just comment here. I get to study a lot of places that are doing fantastic things. And one of the most remarkable ladies that I've met along the way is Phyllis Crane, who works in a town, population 298, Crossnore, North Carolina. She has one of the most difficult jobs I have ever seen in my life. She deals with throwaway children. These are the children in the state of North Carolina who've been taken from their parents and guardians and placed here because nobody else could do anything with them. Many of them are on drugs and have been on drugs from the moment they were conceived. They have behavioral problems, emotional problems, and there she works miracles. And I said to Phyllis, you may be the best leader that I've seen in all of my journey. What's the key? And she said, Vaughn, it's very simple. Learning to say thank you in creative ways. And I want you to reflect on that. And one of the things I'd like for you to do is those people who have helped you get where you've gotten and do what you do to make sure that even if you thank them 100 times, thank them again in a very creative way. So one of the lessons that I've learned from a very extraordinary leader is the importance of saying thank you in creative ways, and she does it in very creative ways. Let me start. Carl said that our theme has been changed. Let me start with a proposition. And the proposition is this, that we live in revolutionary times. Peter Drucker, who really was a mentor to me, for many, many, many years, although he was stationed and doing his work in California and all over the world. But he had written, and I remember once him talking to me and said, Vaughn, the times in which we live, and he had written about this just before his death, the times in which we live today are as revolutionary as the times that produced the Industrial Revolution. Now, if you are a serious historian or if you're just an amateur historian, you may be aware that the whole world changes after the Industrial Revolution. That's what Peter Drucker is suggesting. We live in a whole new world that's on the edge of everything changing. All we would have to do is to have viewed CNN or wherever in the last month or so as we watch these revolutions that are taking place and know full well that the world in which you live is not the world of your children and your grandchildren. And it certainly is not the world of your grandparents. It is revolutionary. Now, let me talk a bit about some of the dimensions of this revolution and what it means for us here in Danville. First, I want to talk about an economic revolution. Now, the Industrial Revolution began in the 1760s with the invention of the steam engine. Danville is here, and you do what you do as a result of the Industrial Revolution. It laid the groundwork for pretty much everything that's here in Danville. So it began in 1760s, but there's always a lag, and so it's a 40-year period before it actually kicks in. So for practical purposes, we can say the Industrial Revolution begins in 1800. Now, you should have on your table an index card and a pen or pencil. Everybody got one? I'm going to ask you some questions, and I don't want you to answer it out loud. I want you to write your answer on your card. So if you pick up that card, you're a full participant in this. Being locked into a platform and a microphone is very disconcerting for me. I tend to walk around. I've heard students say to other students, it doesn't do any good to sit in the back of the room. He'll come back there and talk to you. 2 years ago, the athletic department had called me and said, we've got 4 athletes, 4 football players in your class, and they're not doing well. Don't let them sit in the back of the room. They'll go to sleep. So I went back to the 4 students and suggested that they move to the front. They said no, they were quite comfortable there. So I gave an hour and 15 minutes this close to them, all 4 of them, moving from one to the other. The next day they moved to the front of the class. But I do enjoy moving around and being with you, and it makes me feel much more as a partner. Now, you've got that index card and you've got a pen or pencil. And we're going to make this test that we live in revolutionary times. And I'm going to try to let you convince yourself that that's true. So here we go. Let's look at the economic shifts that occurred with the Industrial Revolution. We've already suggested the Industrial Revolution begins roughly at 1800. Okay, that's a census year, and I choose that very deliberately. So here's the question. I want you to write the answer. Don't answer it out loud, but write it on your card. In 1800, what % of the United States population farmed for a living? Don't answer it. Write it on the card. And now that you're doing that, I'll just kind of walk around and sort of get to know you a little better. In 1800, what % of the United States population farmed for a living? Everybody got the answer written? With confidence, I hope? What's the answer? 80%? 90%? 60? Try 95%. And it may have been 96%. If you didn't farm, what did you do for a living? How would you have made a living? Assuming you're one of the 4 or 5% that didn't farm, how'd you make a living? You're a merchant who sells to farmers, right? You're an attorney. Your clients are farmers. You're a physician. Your patients are farmers. You're a minister. Your congregation is made up of farmers. In 1800, everybody in the United States was linked to the agricultural economy. Right? This is true. All right, next question. Flash forward to March 2011. What percent of the United States population farms for a living today? March 8, 2011. We've had a census, so we know the answer to the question. You may not know it, but I've looked at it. So, what percent of the United States population farms for a living, March 8, 2011? Have you written down your answer? And again, with hope, with confidence. What's the answer? 4, 5, 12. Now, Carl will know the answer, I can guarantee you that. It's under 5%. Some suggestions say it may be as low as 2%. It depends on how you define agriculture. But it's under 5%. In other words, we've completely flipped, right? In 200 years, we've completely flipped. And actually, that's been condensed down to much shorter than that 200 years, right? Now, let's make a proposition. You couldn't possibly produce as much food and fiber using only 2 or 3% of your population as you did with 95%. Is that right or wrong? It's dead wrong. You couldn't produce as much food and fiber, I said, with 2 or 3%. You produce more, right? How? What's the difference? Automation. Education. All kinds of technology, right? We put this to machinery. We got into the field of biology. We got into all kinds of chemistry and whatnot. Technology simply changed everything. So did those people ever find jobs? I mean, you think about how many millions of jobs. When we talk today about how many people are unemployed, think about the unemployment there. Think about how many people are displaced, right? How many millions of jobs you've got to replace. Did those people find work? What's the answer? Sure. Where did they find work? Where did they find new jobs? What kind of industry? You live in such a place, right? Yeah, you took those foods and fibers and you produced something. You used tobacco. You used cotton. They went into manufacturing. In your lifetime, in the lifetime of everyone in this room, there has been the greatest transition in human history. Over 200 million people left the farms in China to go into the factories in 20 years, in your lifetime. It's a revolution, very much ongoing, right? Now, so they found jobs in manufacturing. We're talking about this economic revolution. Now, that should convince you that's a pretty serious transition. They went into manufacturing, and you are in a community that knows that well. You're a manufacturing-based community and have been since your beginning. You're located on a river, as you would be, and I see these large factories and large groups that transferred the tobacco and cotton into some other product. Manufacturing reached its zenith in the United States in the 1950s. At that time, manufacturing accounted for, well, about 35 to 40% of the population in the United States was engaged in factory work or manufacturing. 35 to 40% in the late 1950s. I want you to write on your card now, what percent of the U.S. population is in some form of manufacturing today? What percent of the United States population is in some form of factory work or manufacturing today in March of 2011? We know the answer to that question too. What's the answer? 15%. That's about it. It's probably under 15%, but it's under 15%. Now, just as those agricultural jobs, agriculture remains as important today in 2011 as it was in 1800, guaranteed. Without agriculture, none of us survive, right? So it's just as important. Manufacturing remains just as important, but it's shifted all around. All those factory jobs that are in China today will probably not be there 25 years from now. They will go to all other forms of automation as once it becomes more economically advantageous to get away from cheap labor and go to machinery. It'll happen. It will pretty much happen. They have a very small window in which to be successful in China. I wish them well. I wish the people in India well. I wish the people in Nigeria well. But they will go through the phase too. So the question is, where can you find a job? If you can't find a job in agriculture, and if I had any talent, my grandfather was a farmer, and I so loved my grandfather. First grade education. First grade. Said, I don't know if I finished the first grade or not. Dad said I had to come back and help on the farm. But he said, I learned to read and write. And when my grandfather died, he left me all his books. At age 77, he went back to a community college and got a degree in mathematics. That was while he had had his leg amputated. And he said, well, I don't know of any one-legged farmers. He went back. He recognized the power of knowledge, even though he only had a first-grade education. So the question is, can you get a job anywhere? And where are the jobs? What's the answer? Where are the jobs today? Where would we find them? In technology, service. The word that Peter Drucker used to define this was the knowledge economy. And he began to use that term almost 20 years ago. And he said, we have moved out of manufacturing and we are now in a knowledge economy. And we are. That's where the jobs are, is in the knowledge economy. Now, the way that Drucker defined that, he said that the knowledge economy doesn't require a college degree. But what it does require is some technical and education, formal education. Why couldn't we use apprenticeships? That's a great way to learn. Why couldn't we use apprenticeships as a way to train people? It's a great way to learn, I will tell you. I think it's one of the best. Why is that not possible in the world we live in 2011? Why isn't it a good idea, maybe I should ask? What do you think? The apprenticeships are a great idea. What's the downfall of them, though? The problem is you're teaching yesterday's skills. That's the problem in apprenticeship. And what you want is today's skills. You want to be right out there at the cutting edge. Is where you want to be. And so community colleges become absolutely valuable. One of the people who at the Federal Reserve Bank out of Minneapolis, Art Rolnick, said within the last 3 or 4 years, Art Rolnick, who knows something about economic development, I guarantee you, said that the number one component of economic development in the world today is, and fill in the blank, I want you to write that down. What's the most important component in economic development today in this knowledge economy of March 2011? If somebody's filming me, I'm sorry to be wandering all around, but they're thinking, when's that dumb guy going to stand still? It's probably not going to happen. Okay, what's the answer to the question that I just gave you? He said education. And more specifically, he says the most important element in economic development today is early childhood education. Why is that so important? Why is that so important? Yeah, that's where you learn the fundamentals. And if it's not there, you can go ahead and send them to Harvard or Cambridge or Oxford. You're not going to get the results. It's early childhood education. I want you to look carefully in the Danville region. Most of the children go to daycare centers. My wife and I were hired by NASA several years ago, about 10 years ago, to examine daycare in places where they wanted to be operating. It was atrocious. It was absolutely atrocious. Look carefully at where the children are being sent. But early childhood education is fundamental. It is basic to the economy. Now, the demographics, let me quickly go through the demographic shifts because that's quite relevant. The demographic shift is this, and I think we're aware of this, and we can look at this room and see some of the demographic changes that's happened in the U.S. First of all, the population's aging. Not us, but the rest of the people are aging, right? Very soon in countries like Germany, the average age is going to be creeping up around 60. It's way up there. I've projected it out from Mississippi and North Carolina. It's stunning what the average age is and where it's going. So we're aging. That presents enormous health problems and health issues and costs and whatnot, and we need to rethink these things very carefully. It produces enormous questions of pensions and these kinds of things that everybody in this room is worried about or needs to be worrying about. It produces lots and lots and lots of issues for us, jobs and other things. And the second thing is that there are fewer children being born. There are fewer children being born in all industrial societies. That's been true for quite some time now. Let me give you one last thing, and then I'll move right on. Let's assume that we're going to go out and we're going to make a survey of everybody in the United States. Now, of course, this isn't going to happen, but let's say that we did. We've agreed we're going to go out and we're going to knock on every door. We're going to ask one question. Here's the question. How many people under the age of 18 live in this household? The question is, how many people under the age of 18 live in this household? We're going to knock on every door. We're going to come back with our little clipboards and all our information. And in statistics, there's three measures of central tendency. There's the mean, which is the average, the median, which is the midpoint, and the mode, which is the number that occurs most often. So you've been out and you've studied this for a year and you've come back. It's now 2012. And I say, look at your information. What's the modal number? What number turns up most often? Write it down on your sheet. Write it on your card. You've asked this question, how many people under the age of 18 live in this household? You've written down the answer and you've gone to the next house. My guess is this room represents that modal number. What's the answer? 0. The answer is 0. As with many of you, you had children, but they're no longer in the house, or they haven't had the children yet, right? It is 0. So that raises the question of where the workers are going to come from and who's going to do the work if the population's aging. And it raises all kinds of interesting questions in terms of immigration. Peter Drucker is very optimistic about the United States. He thinks that Japan will have a lot more trouble than we do. But issues of immigration must be seriously considered, and all the implications of that. Okay, now the purpose of my current research is to look at communities that are actually not just doing okay, but are actually thriving in this environment. So let me tell you something about them. Larry Lee is a good friend of mine. Larry's a devout Auburn fan. Do you know Larry? Okay. Larry, 2 or 3 years ago, Auburn, of course, won the National Football Championship. But Larry called me almost in tears, and he says, our football team's doing so poorly, we've decided at Auburn to emphasize academics. We're just giving up football. Just scrub it off. They won the national championship. But that wasn't the question that Larry asked me. Larry asked me, he said, Vaughn, is there any community in the United States that has a strong economic base that doesn't have a good educational system? And I took the question very, very seriously, and I said, give me maybe a month to do the checking. And you know what the answer was, don't you? The answer was, I could not find a single community in the United States that was doing well or really strong in economics or economic base that didn't have a good educational system. That's pretty much true. He said, can you have a strong community without a strong educational system? That was his question. And maybe you found something different. I've not. Some of you know that I know a fair amount about Tupelo. And I'm going to talk to you, just to crunch this down for just a moment, and tell you why you might be interested in them and their results. In 1940, Lee County, Mississippi, that's where Tupelo is located. In the census of 1940, Lee County came out last, dead last in economics in the state of Mississippi. God help you if you're the poorest county in Mississippi. You almost don't have to look it up. There are over 3,000 counties in the United States, and you're probably dead last. I don't know that for a fact, but I know that they're right at the bottom. So in 1940, here's a community that's really poor, desperately poor. We won't go into all the details. What do you suppose the average family made a year in 1940? The average family today makes $46,000, roughly. How much do you think they made in Tupelo in 1940? Anybody want to make a guess? $5,000? Yeah. Under $750 per year. You had 7 members of your family. You had to feed, clothe, house, provide everything for less than $2 a day. Now let's flash forward to 2011. There are approximately 54,000 jobs in this community. There's 35,000 people, 54,000 jobs. There are 46 international corporations there, 18 Fortune 500 companies there, and their economy has outgrown the national economy fairly consistently over a 30-year period. So they're not doing too badly. The question is, how'd you do that? What the heck did you do? Now, one of the reasons that I take your time to tell you about them, they have been cited as a model for economic development in the United States by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, by the Federal Reserve, by Site Selection magazine. They've got credentials coming out their ears that said, we know what we're doing. I think they do. How do they do it? I'm going to crunch this down in very brief form because it often takes me as long as 2 or 3 hours just to explain what happened in Tupelo. We're going to crunch it down. Here's what happened. 80% of the population in Lee County at that time were farmers. This is in 1940. And so, obviously, you know where the problem is. The problem is there among your farmers. That's pretty obvious. You don't need a careful study of that. And so the first thing they did was to organize the farmers. And they organized them in a way in which they put together all the poultry farmers, all the dairy farmers, all the cotton farmers, all the truck farmers, all the potato farmers. And so they had small groups, actually. They got to know each other pretty well. And so they organized literally all the farmers. Virtually every farmer in Lee County was a part of an organization designed to raise themselves. What's going to happen is that they got to do the heavy lifting, just as you do in Danville. They got to do the heavy lifting. If they want a better quality of life, they're going to have to be engaged in it and doing it. That's the lesson that continually comes through Tupelo. It is, by and large, nobody's going to come in here and do it for you. It is, if you want a better community, you're going to have to do it yourself. You're going to have to organize yourself and act smart. So they organized the people at the grassroots level, the farmers. Then they organized the business people. And then they put them together. And basically what they were able to do in this way was to bring the latest technology, the latest ideas to the farmers themselves. And so they introduced all kinds of agricultural technology that would improve the skills of each farmer, raise the quality of life of each farmer one at a time by making them smarter, giving them resources they didn't have in terms of understanding. Edwards Deming, who's the father of total quality management, his ideas were, which later really took hold in Japan and then back in the United States. But they were teaching farmers in late 1940s the ideas of Edwards Deming and keeping careful statistical records and whatnot. The long and the short is that by and large, the farmers made money, which meant the merchants made money because they were the customers. And here's what they did. They made a lot of money. I mean, these merchants have shown me, well, our profits were up by 8%, and then 12%, and 14, 18, and then 22, and eventually over 50%. So the merchants and the farmers made a lot of money. And what they did, they pooled the money in an organization they called the Community Development Foundation. They essentially sort of taxed themselves, only they call it an investment in themselves. I get so angry. I've got to watch my language here. Wind up like Bobby Knight, cussing with an open mic. I get so angry at communities that look to have some industry come in and save them. Invest in yourself, as you have done. Invest in yourself. They pool the money. What do they use the money for? You tell me. They pool their money. What are they going to spend it on? Education. Early childhood education, daycare centers, vocational schools, community colleges, branches of university. All of it focuses on one thing: education, 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 education. Toyota just located there in Tupelo. Why did Toyota choose them? This was a national search. Why did they choose them? I've interviewed a lot of the Toyota executives. You're in the backwaters. What in the world are you doing in the backwaters of Mississippi? What's the answer? Why did they come there? Educated workforce. Now, we know there are other factors. We understand that wages had to do with it. We understand that it's a right-to-work state, all those kind of things. I don't minimize those things. I don't minimize them at all. But there were a lot of places that met that criteria. We came here because it was an educated workforce. Toyota made a commitment of $50 million that they gave to the community. $5 million a year for 10 years. What's the money to be used for? Education. They said, you got a pretty good educational system by U.S. standards. You need to get to be a whole lot better. Let me share one other thing with you that we need to understand in a manufacturing city. Toyota plans to hire 2,000 people. That's a nice employment. The real money is really going to be in the suppliers. I mean, that's where it's going to be. That's where the opportunities are. But Toyota plans to hire 2,000 people. Now, I've talked to, as I said, many, many Toyota executives. How many people do you suppose they plan to interview, or how many applications do they want to get 2,000 people? How many applications do they want? They set this as a target. Anybody want to guess? 10,000? 20,000? Try 200,000. They expect to receive 200,000 applications for 2,000 jobs. You talk about tough competition, and you know they're going to cherry pick. They're going to look for the people with a strong education. That's what they're looking for. People who can solve problems. Right there. That's what they want. That's the world we live in today. Do you know it? That's the world we live in today. I've met with a number of African American leaders who said to me, my gosh, many of my friends can't even make application because you have to make it online. And many of my people don't know how to do this. I mean, I can't tell you how many white and black workers I've had come to me saying, I can't even make an application because I don't know how to use a computer. And so our churches are beginning to put together computer labs and whatnot to make our people computer literate. Now, those are some lessons from Tupelo. Now, the current issues Every one of the current issues has to do with education. That's everything they're working on right now is education. That's it. I mean, all the attention, all the energy, all the resources, pretty much every one of them go on education. Now, I'm going to watch my time. Clark, watch my time and throw heavy objects at me if I run over time. Let me show you what's possible. Let me show you what's possible. Now, I have no doubt that you have a good education system. I also have no doubt that it needs to be better. And I mean that not in any kind of derogatory way, because we all need to get better. Certainly my university needs to get a whole lot better. Let me put you on a magic carpet. Let me fly you to Dallas, Texas, to a place that I know very well. And I'm going to take you into South Dallas. And South Dallas is almost all African American. If you put a wall around us, we'd be about 38,000 people. We are poor. Whereas in the nation, 17 to 18% live below poverty. In our area, over 60% of our people live below poverty. So we're poor. We're poorly educated, whereas in the United States, the average educational level is well above 12 years. Our average educational level is 8 years. You're hard-pressed to find high school graduates in my neighborhood. And we're riddled with crime. We're poor, we're uneducated or poorly educated, and riddled with crime. Right there, our kids, our children, all African American, sweet children, we score at the 91st percentile on standardized tests. We are better than all but 9% of the students in the United States. And here's the thing that really knocks my socks off. We've never had a dropout. No child who ever began in our school has ever dropped out. We're now 27 years old. So every child who began in our school is either in our school or graduated. No dropouts. And what's equally important and equally impressive, none of our children, to the best of our knowledge, has ever been in trouble with the law. That in itself is a miracle. How do we do it? Well, basically, here's what we do. We met, and I say we, there were about 20 of us that came together, all African Americans except this white boy, came together in a church. And we spent the whole weekend talking about the fact that how could we give our children a chance. We knew our children were not just lovable, but intelligent, good people. How could we help our children? We talked about a lot of ideas. We started with what they call the blue sky. What could we do? We recognized that athletics was not a way to go. Somebody raised that, and we said, well, nobody's ever made a living here out of athletics. No, we don't have a single case. Rap music or any music, we didn't have anybody that ever made a living there either. So we decided it was education. That was the only chance for our kids, education. We put together a school. Now, to my chagrin and disappointment, it's a private school. I never wanted it to be a private school. I wanted it to be a public school. But we had trouble with the DISD, the Dallas Independent School Districts. We wanted to do some things they wouldn't let us do. And so we said, well, we'll just have to do it on our own. And here's what we did. Now, I suspect everybody in this room understands the most important element in education. Let me just ask you this question. What is the best predictor of educational success? What one item, what one thing? How would you know a child is going to be successful or not successful in school? What one factor is the most influential? Do you know? You do know. What's the answer? Is it teachers? Parents. It's not teachers. It's parents. We've known that since the 1960s. We've got good, hard scientific data. So here's what we insist on. We insist that every parent takes some interest in their child. Now, I'll tell you, as a person who employs people, I don't want anybody that doesn't take interest in their child. If they don't take interest in their child, they're not going to take an interest in doing quality work for me. I guarantee you that. So it's not just, it's a parental issue. Here's what our principal tells them. To register for our school, you have to come there and be there, which we have registration on Saturday, Sunday, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday. But you got to come and register your child. You can't just send him or her there. And our principal, I've heard him give this presentation many times, including just last month. And he says, you've trusted us with your most valuable possession, your child. And that's a burden, but we accept it. But he says, and he'll show them with a PowerPoint what we're going to do for them. He says, we cannot educate your child. What? What am I sending my child here for? Unless you take an interest in your child and say, Daniel, what'd you do in science today? Let me see your papers. Let's talk about it. What'd you do in your English? Let's talk about that. We expect that. What Terry Flowers, and he's now Dr. Terry Flowers, says to the people, he says, it is biologically impossible for a school to conceive and bear a child. That's a test to see if y'all are still awake, because people usually laugh at that. It is biologically impossible for a school to conceive and bear a child. We have not conceived or born any children except in our own family. They are your children. They do not cease to be your children when you drop them off at 6 in the morning or whenever you drop them off. And we expect you to participate in their education. Many of the parents told us we don't know how to be a good parent. We didn't have good parents. We run parenting classes. Who teaches our parenting classes? Parents, right? So we say there is no excuse. We will not tolerate that. We involve the parents in many, many ways. As I said, we were just there a month ago. And the first thing that happens, the kids get dropped off real early because mom or dad, 67% of our kids are from single-parent homes, 17% from no-parent homes. They live with a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, a brother, somebody. So 84% of our kids are single-parent or no-parent. So they get dropped off real early. I got there at 7 o'clock, and we're just running over with kids, though school doesn't start till 8. So the first program we have is called DEAR, D-E-A-R. It means drop everything and read. The school was just full of parents who had come there to read to the children and let them read to them. Just full of parents, just running over with parents. And they do that first hour of DEAR. And we've got them all day long. We have 35 basketball teams with a PE budget of 0. Who coaches our basketball teams? Parents. Yeah. A lot of parental involvement. A lot of pride. When you walk down our halls, there are no athletic trophies. I said we got 35 basketball teams. I've never been in a basketball season. Don't we ever win any games? Don't we ever have any trophies? I have been in this school now for, I think I asked that question. I said, I've been coming to this school and been a part of developing this school for 20 years, and I've never seen a single basketball trophy. They took me back to the gym. They opened this closet door, and trophies just fell out on the floor. They pushed them back. And they said, we're not interested in those. When you walk down the hall, there's a picture of Catherine, A+ mathematics. There's a picture of Benjamin, A+ biological science. There's a picture of Susan, A+ English. They're our stars. We give not only stars for academic achievement, for just being a good citizen. We select stars. And they wear those pins proudly. It's about pulling together, of forming that partnership. It's always about forming partnerships. Partnerships between the school and the parents and the community. Let me show you something here. We've got some pictures here I think are going to come up. There's where we were. That's the buildings on our site. We do things that are so smart that don't cost us anything. There's a crack house over here. Boy, is it giving us trouble. Finally got rid of it. This is typical. We had hundreds of homes that looked just like that. I looked, there hadn't been a building permit almost in the 20th century. I mean, no, that's silly. Since the 1950s, until we built our school. We had it in mobile homes, and we could put our mobile homes anywhere, and we asked the parents, where do you think we ought to put our mobile homes? They said, let's go to Pennsylvania Avenue. What address did we choose on Pennsylvania Avenue? 1600. When you walk in the school, the first thing you see, and here's the main entrance right here, there's a picture of the White House, and it says, what will you do when you're at the other 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? Let me tell you the extent to which we go. We expect every child not only to graduate from school, but to go on to college. You might say, Martha, you're in the 3rd grade. Where are you going to college? We have on our campus 2 advisors from the University of Texas. This is an elementary school. We only go up to the 8th grade. We want them thinking about where they're going to go to college when they're in the 3rd grade. I was walking down the hall with the principal, and a little kid bumped into him, and he said, hey, Jared, what's your favorite class? Then he said, where are you going to college? And he didn't say, Dr. Flowers, I'm only in the 4th grade. He said, Texas A&M. What you studying there? Studying electrical engineering. 4th grade. We set those standards from the get-go. There is that power in every one of those precious children. And they're our children. And we take responsibility for them. We take that seriously. Have I got any more time at all, Clark? 2 minutes, very quickly. Promise you. I told you how we did it. There's our creed. I won't read it to you. Take you very quickly to Houston, Minnesota. Population 1,000. We're in the Root River Valley. Root River flows into the Mississippi River right down the way from us. We're a small community, 1,000. We're agriculture. Never had a distinguished school. Never at all. Very average, very ordinary. We changed superintendents back at the turn of the century, turn into the new millennium. And the new superintendent, who I know quite well, had a visit from the Department of Education, Minnesota Education Department, came in and said, Mr. Superintendent, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you are too small to exist as a school. The state rule is that you must have a minimum of 500 students enrolled in your school system to be a separate school district, and you have 483. So we're closing you and consolidating you. That will happen next year. And there's worse news than that. The previous superintendent was reporting a bigger attendance than you had, so you actually owe us money. And here's the bill. You actually owe us several $1 million because we paid you money for students you didn't have, and we want our money. Gee, my knee. That's what happened. That's a picture we took. We all met. We're good Lutherans. We all met down at the Lutheran church and said, how are we going to solve this problem? This is our school. What are we going to do? Now, of course, they blame the superintendent. The guy's been on the job 1 month. So they said, you dummy, how could you screw up the school in 1 month? Well, he just ended the blame game and said, I take responsibility. The guy didn't have a clue, nor could he have. But he said, let's don't play the blame game. I'm responsible for messing up the school. How do we get out of it? What do we do? Now, I brought an activity for you to engage you here because these were citizens just like you gathered here. And the question was, what would you do? You want to throw any ideas out from your table? Any ideas? What would you do? The first thing you got to do is get your enrollment up to 500. You only got 483. What's the first thing you would do? And Clark cut me off when we're at the end.
Go after dropouts,
right? That's what we did. We'd had a lot of dropouts. We knew if we brought them back and put them in the same system, they'd fail again, wouldn't they? And so we had this teacher who was probably the most lackadaisical, just plain lazy teacher in the whole school system, had no respect whatsoever. And what he said is, I volunteer for that. He was bored with these other students. He took that on. Boy, these dropouts, I've been in those classes a lot. That is some challenge. These kids are often troubled kids. 95% of our, no, I'll take it back. 100% of all our kids in that program have graduated now. And they're scoring at the 95th percentile. So we got our dropouts back. And that alone made up the deficiency. What else would you do? Pardon? We can't recruit from other areas. Except we can. How do we do it? We do recruit from other areas. You're right. How do we do that? Do you know?
Get them to move to town.
Could get them to move to town. We hadn't got enough jobs for them or housing or anything else. So we didn't. Now I'm going to come over here to these young people right here. And I'm going to put the burden on them. What did we do? Pardon? Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't have my glasses on. All right, young people, the burden's on you. What are we going to do? We need students. What are we going to do? Where are we going to get them?
Start a preschool, bring in some younger kids.
Preschool, but what else? I was just sure that this young group would zap it right off. We use the internet. About 2 hours from us is the Mayo Clinic. And we recognize that a lot of those patients were children who needed to be getting school, but who couldn't. And we could hook up an internet to educate them. And then we could educate them all around. Today we have 1,800 students using the internet, and we make money. Let me tell you one other thing we did. At that meeting where all those people are gathered, one guy said, look, we live in a knowledge economy, but most of the people in this town not only don't know how to use a computer, they're scared to death of a computer. He went all over the state looking for used computers that were out of date. And he got enough computers that we brought them back, and we have now given or sold at very little cost a computer to every house in Houston, Minnesota. Every house now has a computer and is online. We went to the telephone company and said, what if we got you a whole bunch of customers? Would you give us a special rate? And what was the answer? Yes, and they did. What do they think the server is for our computers? Where does that originate? The server. It's the school. So when you turn on your computer in the morning, comes up the school. We have rebuilt this entire community around education. Payoff. State of Minnesota, and you know it very well, state of Minnesota has the highest ACT scores in the United States. Which school has the highest ACT scores in Minnesota? Houston, Minnesota. Little bitty town. We didn't have a band, a school band. We didn't have enough people because half our people be on the athletic field. See, we're a little bitty school. And so one of the school board members dropped out and formed a community band. The criteria is if you show up and have your own instrument, you get to be in the band. And so we've built a sense of pride there. We owed a lot of money, so citizens began to come in and help paint the school and do the landscaping. We have full involvement of the whole community. They take great pride in the school. We're really good. We're really good. And we also have no dropouts. We're a really good school. Let me tell you one of the unexpected things. We had about one of the poorest football teams. And we can't play full football. We don't have enough players to play with 11 men. So we play, 8-man football, I think it is. At any rate, we were 0-10 when we started this program. Last year, we were 16-0 and won the state championship. It's just infected the whole community. We own that school. We take pride in that school. Just as they do in Tupelo, just as they do in South Dallas, here. It's our school. We take pride in it. Let me thank you again for being here.